Welcome to this wonderful session, and I'm really grateful that after Jonathan delivered such a wonderful session on financial interpretation, he's still in the U.S. He is here for another month, so I'm glad we're able to catch him and before you guys graduate and go on your internship. And so what he's going to talk about today is really practical, and I think it's also going to be very inspirational. So with that, let's welcome Jonathan.
Thank you so much, Winnie. Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing?
Fabulous.
Fabulous. That's what I like to hear. A little warm-up engagement. It's 12:30 on a Tuesday afternoon. I understand this is prime lunchtime. I really want to thank you guys for coming out. I want to thank Winnie and the entire MIIS institution for inviting me. This is my second time coming in just a couple of weeks, and it's really an honor to be here. So I'm here humbly to share my experience as a conference interpreter and erstwhile translator myself, who in 2010 began building a freelance career. And I want to share with you guys, as you move towards graduation, some of my experiences and some kind of tips and tricks for building a freelance career from scratch. I am representing a company called Cadence, which you may or may not have heard of. We're a platform for interpreters and translators. We have a network of close to 2,000 freelance translators and interpreters, and we serve clients across the business, government, and media sectors. And we'll talk more about how running this platform has given us a lot of data on the marketplace, and that data can be very informative as you make decisions to build your own careers. So, you guys are almost 2 years in to your studies in TILM, and I again went through my own studies between 2008 and 2010. I want to let you know I feel your joy and I feel your pain. For most of you, this has probably been two of the most challenging and hardworking and dedicated years of your life. They certainly were for me. There is a passion that is required to be successful in these studies. You know, putting aside all the marketplace stuff and the industry, just to study TILM requires a kind of dedication and grit that is really admirable and is also very fulfilling. And sometimes it feels like this, like you're in the zone, or maybe you're with your classmates and there's this sense of camaraderie and it's very joyful. Other times it feels like this, and you're just banging your head constantly against a wall. It's never good enough for your own expectations. It's never good enough maybe for your teacher's expectations. And TILM is not for perfectionists. So we really have to do everything we can as we go into exam period to remember that what's most important is that we're doing our best and that we stay calm, cool, collected, and focused. The good news is that after all of this blood, sweat, tears, hard work, and camaraderie that you've put in over 2 years, you guys are about to be liberated. There's this impending sense of release, and I certainly know by May of my second year of interpreting school, dear God, was I ready to get out of the ivory tower and into the marketplace and kind of prove myself and show the world what all of this knowledge and skills acquisition has been for. So in the next couple of weeks, there's going to be this kind of swell of excitement as we get ready to kind of break forth from the confines of the academic hall and into, that wasn't the slide I thought it was going to be. That. Now what? Oftentimes, we get really excited for the future, and yet we don't always have a particularly high definition vision of what the future will bring. Especially for those of you that are preparing to go into freelance careers. What lies before you is actually quite a bit of unknown, quite a bit of uncertainty. If you have a job lined up, if you're going in-house, that's spectacular. Congratulations. You might still find this talk useful, but this, the session today, I really want to focus on kind of the great unknown. And I'll share my own story, the John Rechtman story, brought to you now, exclusive at MIIS. So this is me several years into the interpreting career. The quick, 3-slide background on my own story is I was born and raised in New York, happy little New Yorker. I fell in love with Chinese food as a child, and I thought the coolest thing in the world would be able to order Chinese food off a Chinese menu in Chinese, and that was like my #1 goal in life. I just thought that would be so cool. So my entire career in languages began with a form of gluttony, a desire to be able to eat more and better. That took me to Beijing, where I studied Chinese English in conference interpreting under the European Union's collaborative program with the Chinese Ministry of Commerce. The program is hosted at UIDE. There are actually 2 programs in China that are run by the EU. 2-year conference interpreting program, very similar to the education you've received here. A number of Monterey staff, faculty were also mentors of mine. Laura in the back is certainly one of them, but also many other of the MIIS faculty and professorship have been very dear and very supportive in our own program. I graduated in 2010, and over the years have been very fortunate in building a very happy and I think somewhat successful freelance career. So after graduating, or in the 7 years since graduating, I've had the opportunity to work with the World Economic Forum, at APEC, at the United Nations, a number of kind of international conferences. I've gotten to work with a lot of famous people. The last 10 years in China have been a great time for kind of Hollywood going global, and so worked with a lot of movie stars for the major studios, Fox and Universal. Just because this is meant to be not just for interpreters but also translators, I've been fortunate enough to be able to translate a number of large publications. So this is a book by one of China's, the president of China's largest development bank. In fact, it's the largest development bank in the world, China Development Bank. He published a book that I translated. KPMG writes a lot of kind of top shelf white papers that I translate for on a regular basis. So across conference interpreting and translation, I've been very fortunate in my career. And really all of this in a freelance capacity. That being said, it's not just kind of as simple as you graduate, now go, work at the World Economic Forum and hang out with movie stars. There was kind of a lot that went in between A and B, and that's really what I want to focus on today, is kind of what were the steps that got me from just starting out to living a pretty decent life as an interpreter and translator. So here I am in 2008, just graduating, full of hope and goofy smiles, and getting ready to kind of throw my hat into the freelance ring, as it were. I had absolutely, I think the picture kind of shows, I had no idea what I was doing. Completely, didn't really know how to tie a tie, still, didn't really know how to get a haircut, still not sure I do, but trying to figure things out. And I had it in my mind that as soon as you graduate, it's time to go to work, and I'm gonna have lots of clients, and everything is gonna be great. I've studied so hard, I'm prepared for this, my skills are really top notch. I passed my graduating finals, I was so excited, and then I spent the next 6 months doing this, waiting for the phone to ring. It was really, really difficult to break into the market, and I warn all of you that are about to begin freelance careers, it's tough. It requires a lot of patience, and it takes a combination of proactivity in going out and putting yourself out there, as well as kind of a circumspect tact, in that what we don't want you to be are that kind of really aggressive salesman type, and we'll talk about what that looks like later. But kind of part of the dilemma is that there's a lot of linguists out there. There's a lot of translators. There's a lot of interpreters, and I've called this program "Stand Out" because one of the questions is, how do you differentiate yourself in a marketplace? And that's something that I think probably isn't covered very much in the academic training that you receive. You've been privileged enough to receive training from some of the best teachers on earth in translation and interpretation. But my guess is that your studies have been focused very much on skills and knowledge, and probably a little bit less on marketplace practices. So just really quickly, if you go on LinkedIn and you look for an interpreter, you just search interpreter, you get, somewhere between 250,000 and 500,000 results. 300,000 on prose. It's very difficult to stand out. If you were going to, use web marketing, you would find it very, very expensive to try and buy your way towards visibility. So the question is kind of, as an individual freelancer, how can you make yourself discoverable? You want to be found, you want to be chosen, but as I said, you don't want to be the guy that is screaming at everybody that he meets, do you want an interpreter? Do you need a translator? I've seen that in play, and it's not pretty. I've seen people that kind of haunt conferences where they haven't been invited as interpreters, and they just come with business cards, and they pass out business cards to everyone they can meet. And it's not a particularly classy way of making yourself visible. So I want to suggest a couple of things that can be done. My number one suggestion would be to engage with live communities. And the good news is that this is a lot of fun. When I say communities, I basically just mean groups of people that have come together for a common purpose, and hopefully a purpose that has some direct or tangential relationship to cross-border engagement, because otherwise, you're not going to find anybody that needs language services. In TILM, of course, you have your alumni community is one of the most important kind of communities that you can stay engaged with. There are professional associations, Interpret America by Barrett Olson. GALA is the name of a global languages industry forum. On the professional side, these are just kind of professional communities that don't necessarily have anything to do with TILM specifically, but in my own kind of story, I spent a lot of time networking, you could call it, but really contributing to organizations like the Foreign Correspondence Club. I was living in China for 10 years. I would attend events. I would offer pro bono interpreting or translation services if they were needed. I would volunteer. The chambers of commerce, wherever you are in the world, whatever your languages are, I assure you that the relevant nations and economies have chambers of commerce there. Connect with them. Be a part of that community. Be visible. Engage. Honestly, just social engagement. Join a book club. Be part of a sports team. Make sure you are out in society, that people know who you are and know what you do. That is, I would say, like the number one step. It's a little odd that I have to list this as the number one thing to do to build a freelance career, but a lot of linguists, it turns out, are kind of shy and are kind of introverted and don't get out a lot. And it's kind of hard to be discovered if nobody knows who you are. So those would be my first kind of suggestion would be live engagement with communities. I would also recommend that you have an online presence, which makes you discoverable to a much larger audience. Kind of general online platforms that you definitely want to be on. LinkedIn, absolutely for sure, you must be on LinkedIn. We'll talk a little bit about how LinkedIn profiles should look. Quora is just an example, one of many kind of online forums in which you can build expertise or authority or credibility in a particular field. That could be translation and interpretation. It could also be a particular domain that you find yourself passionate about. And we'll talk a bit more why it's important for TILM professionals to have kind of a specialization rather than be generalists. There are industry-specific forums, Translators Cafe and Pros, I'm sure you've both heard of. Cadence has our own kind of social media platform that I will invite you all to engage in. I've kind of lumped together all of the social stuff, the Facebooks, the Twitters, the Instagrams. Look, it can't hurt. I'm not saying like you're going to be, rolling in clients because you pasted a picture of your cat on Instagram, but it's 2017, and it really is helpful in almost any career to have some kind of a digital presence. I put up a blog just because you guys all love language and maybe you enjoy writing, and maybe you want to track your own journeys. You can do that on your own blog, and again, I will invite you to contribute to the Cadence social media platform as well later. In addition to all of that stuff, all of the hanging out and going to book clubs and like networking and TED Talks and posting on social media, you gotta also stay focused on your skills. And so a big part of my first 6 months as a freelancer, while I was sitting there waiting by the phone, was practicing interpreting by myself every day, just like I had been in school. So like, here's where the fun stops, and I say like, even though you're about to graduate, you are a lifelong learner of your craft, and you cannot stop practicing just because you're out of school. So I don't know if you guys have seen Karate Kid most recently with Jackie Chan. It's pretty great. Your focus needs more focus. You are never finished practicing because all of the marketing you can do, all the visibility that you want to gain, at the end of the day, you are valuable because of the skills, and you need to keep those skills fresh. They do erode. If you step away from translating, you step away from interpreting for months at a time, and you're not active, and you're not seeing your classmates every day, and you're not in class, those skills will rust. So it's important that you keep that up. Discipline, number one. Okay, you got some clients interested in you. You've made yourself visible. Somebody's got a project. They're interested in seeing, learning more about your technical abilities. 3 basic ways that you can share your experience with potential clients. Your long CV, your long resume, which basically is a list, an exhaustive list of every project you've ever worked on or every client you've ever hosted. I think it's totally fine to do this. A number of I personally don't have an exhaustive list of everything I've done. A number of my clients do. I think it is impressive when you're several years into your career and you can show page after page after page of conferences you've done. Not like my number one thing that I would worry about at your stage, but do just try and keep a record as you accumulate experience. Much better is the short 1-page CV. I'll talk about that in more depth. And then your LinkedIn profile, which again, I think in 2017 is the number one means by which you will be discovered and judged. So it's really important to have a sense of what belongs and doesn't belong in these formats. So really quick, can I get a hand raised? How many of you are from nations outside of the United States? Awesome, cool. So I think that resumes are actually a very kind of local and cultural product. A resume, my main experience is with China. A resume in China, a good resume in China looks very, very different than a good resume in the US. So just for the sake of non-Americans in the crowd that are, can I get another show of hands? How many people are interested in working with American or Western clients? Yeah, okay, so that makes a lot of sense. This is an example of a very typical kind of bad resume that we get from suppliers in China. It contains a lot of jargon which will be very unfamiliar to Western readers. So CET is I think the Chinese English test or equivalent test, or I don't even know what it is. I've been in China for 10 years, I don't really even know what it is. These are all, kind of credentials and qualifications that might make sense in your home market but mean nothing to an international audience. Got a lot of exciting chatter here. There's also a lot of kind of extraneous information that is typical in some kind of cultural expectations of resumes that is not in the US. So in China, for example, your nationality, your body type or body condition, your political status are all kind of expected, you know, entries that you would be expected to put on an employment form, not appropriate for a Western resume. And generally, we look for a concise, you know, list of experiences rather than a narrative description of what one does. So here is by contrast, you know, a more model CV. This kind of lists out in bullet point fashions what people's expertise are at the industry level, what a basic timeline of their kind of work and education history is. It's visually very simple. It, you know, highlights their kind of top traits up at the top. For your CV and essentially for your, you know, LinkedIn profile, you absolutely must have your contact info, a short summary of what services you provide. That's not a qualitative self-assessment. It's not saying, I'm really good at, you know, making jobs go well. It's just kind of, I do this, I do that, and I do that. And then followed by your education or any credentials that qualify you to do those things, and your experience doing them. Definitely make sure to highlight any specific industries that you've worked in, even if it's an internship you've done with, say, a local hospital or something. That counts for a lot. It signals expertise in a particular domain. It's always a good idea to put a link to your LinkedIn profile in your CV. We covered home country CVs are very different, so make sure you localize them. You would be welcome to share with me your CVs, and Cadence would be happy to give you guidance on formatting CVs. It's something we see a lot of you know, kind of TILM resumes, and we'd be happy to offer feedback on yours. Generally, if you are using a kind of public email address, Westerners are going to expect Gmail or Outlook, maybe Yahoo if you're pushing it. Again, in Asia, we see a lot of kind of local, you know, @163.com, which, you know, we might laugh, you've never heard of it, but there are hundreds of millions of people with @163.com email addresses. But to a Western client, it looks a little funny. So Gmail and Outlook are best. When you send your resume to a client, always as a PDF, never as a Word document. That's just kind of standard. And one thing that Cadence has done and has been very well received by clients is we ask our freelancers to make a short video of themselves, like a selfie video, and just introduce themselves in a couple of minutes, talk about really less than a couple of minutes. Best is if it's under 60 seconds. Hi, my name is Jonathan. I'm a Chinese English conference interpreter. I'm from New York but based in Beijing. I have expertise in finance, government, and environment. I would be very happy to work with you. Please, you know, contact me through Cadence if you'd like to book my services. Something like that. It puts, you know, a picture is worth 1,000 words, a video is worth 10,000 words. And it really builds a relationship with the client before that you've even met them. For non-native English speakers, it gives you a chance to kind of show off your accent, that, you know, you are somebody that they would want to listen to speaking for several days at a time if it's a multi-day engagement. The same goes for translators. Most importantly is just kind of putting a personal and confident voice to your expertise. When it comes to expertise, this can be a little controversial, but I want to impress upon you the importance of highlighting a few industries and claiming authority and credibility and confidence in those industries, but not trying to assert confidence across all industries. There's this big temptation in TILM to present oneself as a generalist. And I know because, for my first couple of years, I really did, try and say, I'll do anything, right? If you've got money, I'm your man. I'm an expert in whatever it is you do. And I understand, that part of our training is to be good at research, to be adaptive, to be able to, respond flexibly to many different situations. So there are kind of generalist attributes to our skill sets. That being said, if after a year or several years of practice, you have developed exposure, disproportionate exposure to one or between 3 and 5 segments of the economy, you are going to be better qualified than other translators or interpreters in that field. And so it's important to try and build a portfolio, and then again, I mentioned on Quora why you might want to say, for example, respond to anything about healthcare in Korea, if you're a Korean translator with a lot of expertise in medical. Developing a reputation as somebody who really knows their stuff in this field or fields is particularly valuable. So, I just mentioned myself. I do a lot in finance, government, and what it is? Environment. Thank you. Good interpreters over there. I could name a couple of other areas that I'm particularly confident in. I wouldn't name more than 7 or 8. 3, 5, 7, 8. Not to say that I'm not going to say I've never accepted work outside of those fields or that I won't in the future, but it is kind of important to associate, as part of your personal brand, to assert some expertise in a particular field. And we'll talk more about what industries we've seen at Cadence have been, in the highest demand. Yay! So you've made yourself visible, and you've got all your your CV and your LinkedIn profile, everything's set. You're ready to go. You're ready to, talk to clients. You're ready to start work. How do you deal with these clients? The kind of next theme that I want to talk about is focusing on having a relationship in the industry rather than just being transactional. And that's true for your relationships with clients, but also with other actors in the market. And I'll explain a little bit more what I mean by that. So here are kind of like 2 ways that a conversation could go. A client has, heard about you from their friend at the Chamber of Commerce. They've asked to see your CV. And they call you and say, like, we have this job, are you available? If you're in a very kind of transactional mindset, these are more attitudes than anything. You could say, yes, I'm available, you've seen my resume, I charge, $200 an hour or $1,000 a day, take it or leave it. And you also have to, here's my cancellation policy, and I need you to sign a contract by today, or consider me not available. That is a lot of interpreters kind of approach client negotiations that way, and it really becomes kind of a confrontational relationship with a lot of bartering, where the client is trying to get your price down, and you're trying to get more benefits, and and you need to pay for a full day for my travel, and I'm not saying that any of that is bad. I'm just saying that it creates a kind of limited scope for you to work together. It really becomes a zero-sum game. What I would encourage you to do is to start the conversation with understanding what is this client really trying to achieve? Why are they hiring an interpreter or a translator in the first place? If we're talking about the private sector, what are the business objectives? If it is an embassy, what is the context of these meetings? Why am I the best fit for this job? And if it's the first time that you're talking to a client, a really important question is, what are your expected future needs as well? Because if this is not a one-off, kind of one-time gig, and it's part of a longer series of engagements, that gives both sides a lot more room to compromise when it comes to things like rates or cancellation policies or contract terms. So I would say putting all of that kind of hard brass tacks negotiation much later down the conversation and starting with an understanding of what people are trying to achieve. Now the same is true with your relationships, not just with clients, but also with colleagues. Somebody once told me at the beginning of my career, and this is really good advice, your colleagues are your best clients. So, look at the person next to you, all of you, your classmates, the colleagues that you'll work with in the booth if you're simultaneous interpreters, that you'll work together with on translation projects. Build those relationships, invest in those relationships. There's often a kind of unwritten rule of reciprocity, which says, I'll invite you to work on this project. I have a relationship with the client. I'll invite you to come along on this project with me, but you have to invite me, next time. Sometimes that proposition is made a little uncomfortably explicit. Sometimes it really kind of sounds more like a kickback. It's this kind of tit for tat trading that again is very transactional. I would really, really encourage you, rather than kind of saying, I'll do something for you if you do something for me, but rather to take the time, and when I say invest, it really means just spending quality time with your colleagues, with your peers. I sure hope you enjoy one another. I sure hope that you've built friendships over the course of these past 2 years. I hate to break it to you, but if you don't like linguists, if you don't like translators and interpreters, you're going to have a tough time in this career, because you're going to spend a lot of time with your colleagues, and they are the most important source of business. So, professionally can be by, in all of those kind of fora that I mentioned, attending industry conferences, alumni groups, but also socially. I can't tell you how much time in my first 6 months in the freelance market that I spent going on hikes or playing badminton with other interpreters. It makes a big difference. Make that effort. Be proactive. Organize group outings with your classmates to share resources, share experiences. It's a much, much better way to get ahead. And then finally, it would be unfair to not talk about agencies, which kind of sit between you and the market. And so here, the kind of transactional versus relational model that I've suggested, these quotes are really more what the agency would say. And so now I'm going to kind of transition in my role as representing Cadence, which isn't an agency so much as a platform, but we do have a relationship with clients and we have a relationship with interpreters. And so we've noticed that a lot of agencies, I don't know about your home markets, but especially in China, they have a pretty bad reputation. The way that a lot of agencies work is they try and firewall the interpreters or translators from the clients. They never let them communicate with one another because they're afraid that they'll go off platform, that they'll be disintermediated. And they just try and jack up the price to the client as much as possible and squeeze the supplier to the lowest possible rates. And they do some pretty dishonest stuff. They'll tell the client that we're getting you the best possibly trained interpreters, and then when they win the contract, they replace all of those, they'll even show your resumes to clients, and then they'll swap in kind of college students to actually do the work and pay them nothing. Some really shady stuff. So, be careful when you work with agencies. But the way we think about it is rather than trying to maximize margins and minimize communication between suppliers and demand, we're really trying to think about how we can make the whole process run smoother for both sides. And obviously, clients, our clients are number one in our minds. They are our number one priority. But I hate to break it to you, interpreters and translators are priority number 15 to your clients. They're just not like, they don't want to think a lot about translation and interpretation. So, you know, one thing that a platform is valuable in doing is managing that relationship and making it very smooth and seamless. For the suppliers, you know, the value that we're trying to add is, again, a simplification. Just take a moment, kind of take this in. If you're starting a freelance practice, you're actually starting a small business. What you think, what you want to do as a freelancer is deliver a valuable service and then just kind of sit back, get paid, and relax. It doesn't really work like that. Starting a freelance practice means doing everything I just said, being discoverable, putting up your LinkedIn profile, maintaining your CV, marketing your services, finding customers. Then you're setting rates, you're negotiating rates, you draft a contract, you know, at some point in this you deliver a service, you are sending invoices. If they're going cross-border payments, you're managing your foreign exchange, you're collecting payments, you're coordinating logistics, you're chasing down the clients to get documents so that you can prepare, and then after all of that, maybe you get a chance to deliver your service. But like, you really do spend a tremendous amount of time doing this when you want to be doing this. And so, you know, when Cadence thinks about building a relationship with suppliers, we think about how we can unload all of that kind of boring, mind-numbing business administration part off of the professionals and let them focus on doing their jobs in language services. So that's you know, the way that we approach that. And rather than trying to throw up a firewall between our professionals and our clients, we encourage them to talk to each other as much as possible because we think that that builds trust and that, you know, we as the platform will benefit from that trust. And it also just makes workflows much simpler. If you've ever worked on a translation project, there's so much back and forth that has to, that has to take place. You really don't want another layer of middlemen in between. So as Cadence, we see our role really is just we handle all the client management, all the business. The professionals deliver the service. Everybody wins. In the course of delivering these services, we've developed, you know, an assiduous database of market economics for translation and interpretation across the world. I would be, I think, are we good until 11:30 hard stop or 11:30 and then we have time for Q&A?
1:30 and then maybe 15 minutes Q&A.
Cool. Great, okay. So I would love to share some of this. We are in 310 cities, and that is for live on-site interpretation. Obviously, our translation business can be delivered anywhere. We are primarily focused on interpreting. How many interpreters in the room? Great. Translators? Oh, okay, cool. So we got a little bit of both, but it looks like our audience pretty much proportionally reflects Cadence's business. So mostly interpretation. We do a lot of on-site interpretation in these 310 cities, but we also do increasingly a lot of remote interpretation. We've done thousands of hours of consecutive interpretation over the phone. Increasingly, we are pioneering simultaneous interpretation over the phone, and this is like a really exciting new field that not a lot of people are doing. And which clients are clamoring for. There's a big demand for on-the-phone SI that we're excited to share with you. Uh-oh. Okay. We've been working with MIIS grads a lot. We have 176 interpreters, maybe you recognize some of them, that are graduates of this fine Institute of Learning. Our platform has paid out over $70,000 in kind of contract fees to graduates on over 107 jobs. Well, no, not over 107 jobs, specifically 107 jobs. So that's kind of our history with MIIS. We're working in these 19 languages, always trying to expand. And what I'm about to share are some relative data on how supply and demand on our platform affect price in different language pairs, in different industries, and in different geographies. I just want to make like a couple of disclaimers. First of all, I'm going to be sharing primarily proportional differentials rather than absolute numbers. So rather than telling you this language pair is this price or that price, I'm going to tell you, we have an average of all of the language pairs, and these languages are X% above average or X% below average. Same with industries and geographies. I want to also disclaim that all of these are just based on our single platform. So basically we have a demand side and a supply side that sets the price, free market economics, but we don't represent the entire world economy of supply and demand. We have a lot of biases in our own platform. So our company was started in China. We have, our platform, both supply and demand, is skewed towards East Asia. But I do think, over the years we have been diversifying, and so I think that there is relative value in these statistics. Same is true with the industries. I think this is kind of informative data, but understand that it comes from one data set, which is our own. So here are the prices, price demand that we've seen. This represents the average, and you'll notice a pretty kind of defined trend where East Asian languages are commanding significantly higher prices. Japanese, Korean, Mandarin and Cantonese are third and fourth. There's a short drop down. European languages are ringing in at precisely the kind of the average of our payouts: French, German, Spanish, Portuguese. Southeast Asian languages a little below our average, and we are seeing a fairly low demand, or low demand for Arabic, but that's also partially because we don't market at all in that sector. So a lot of our clients are in finance, and the language demand follows, the stock markets in a very real way. So East Asia is hot. Southeast Asia is also pretty active. Not a lot of investor interest in Russia or the Middle East these days for financial reasons. If we were marketing more towards oil and gas sectors and the government and diplomatic sectors, we would probably see a different shift. So don't be discouraged if these are your language. And I share this knowing that this is not exactly something that you can change. Your language pairs are your language pairs. But this is what we're seeing on our platform: a premium for East Asia, average prices in the European languages, and we don't do much in Russia or the Middle East. That could also just be because we have too many suppliers in those languages. My industry expertise, finance. Gotta be honest, guys. This is not advice for the TILM sector specifically. It's just kind of life advice or a way of understanding the world in late stage American capitalism, but like, follow the money. That's where we're seeing the highest rates paid are for translators and interpreters that have real expertise or work experience or linguistic savvy in finance, banking, investment. It really does command a premium above the market average. So I think many of you were with us a couple weeks ago when we did a lecture on finance for interpreters. We're going to continue doing those kind of educational seminars. We have one coming up in June, which I'll tell you more about as a webinar. But it really pays, literally, to kind of brush up on your finance and economics, because it does command higher rates. Government and the arts and entertainment also performing kind of above average. Environment, I mentioned, is one of my specialties. It's definitely a high demand or regularly recurring segment of the market. On the bottom, tourism is kind of, it often gets mixed in with, am I hiring an interpreter or am I hiring a guide? So it tends to kind of be a bit slushed in with the bottom of the value chain as far as interpreters go. I don't know why apparel ranks so low on in our data set, but it does. I think if you were, again, I suspect that it could be a lot of like lower wage interpreters getting hired to do factory visits to textile plants. Could be one reason. Anyway, we have a taxonomy of, I think, over 100 industries, and these are a selection of some of the big winners and losers. That being said, 17% above average, 14% below average. It's not as drastic as some of the differentials that we saw in language pairs. Price by geography. We've got San Francisco, looking pretty good. Who's planning to stay in California after graduation? Not too many. Who's planning to go home? Where's everybody planning to go? Give me some names. New York. New York looks like it's right in the middle. DC. Number 2. 20% above average. What else we got? Who's staying in America? About half.
That depends a little bit, I think.
Depends a little bit, okay. Anyway, it looks that the outperformers here are generally capitals in the US and East Asia. Second, we have, as I said, 310 cities. These were kind of picked to be representative of different geographies. If you're interested in more granular data, if for example you're considering between 2 cities, we would be happy to, please contact me and ask what are the relative prices between, say, if you're in China, Xi'an or Chengdu. There are significant differences between first and second tier cities, between different second tier cities. We can do some cool things with the data, like if you have a particular industry interest and you are interested in 2 cities, we can tell you which is the best city for you based on that industry. There's a lot of cool stuff that can be done with this, but here is kind of just a sampling. Finally, I want to end on some good news. These are average actual hourly prices based on educational attainment. So, you've just put in 2 years to get a, platinum brand graduate degree. It really does make a difference in the marketplace. So, suppliers in our network that have not done a professional degree in translation and interpreting for by the hour interpreting services make less than $90 an hour on average. Those with kind of top tier degrees make over $150 an hour. So you would fall into that latter category, and that's a pretty significant, that's a 2/3 increase or something. And so that's the good news. That could be we charge up to $300 an hour. I think is kind of where we peak. But for those of you that are successful, and I believe most of you will be, with your examinations, you can look forward to pretty good remuneration. I'm just going to leave you with this, a little bit of an old Irish prayer that I've always appreciated. You guys have done the work. You guys have put in a lot of effort, and you have a long road ahead of you. And I've been down that road. I've been down my own road. Yours is going to be very different than mine. It's really an honor to share with you, some of the things that I've experienced. But may the road rise up to meet you, and may the wind be always at your back. That's the end of my formal presentation. So thank you guys very much, and please let's take a couple minutes and do Q&A. Thank you.
Two questions. First, you said it's better to have specialization, but when we graduate, we kind of have general specialization. So what is the best way to choose, or do you have to base it on the jobs you do, like the first set of the jobs you do, and then you try to specialize in that? And the second question, I guess, is to both maybe you and Winnie. You were talking about the email, and it recently brought to my attention that yahoo.com apparently is not a very good email to have. And I personally didn't know I have a Yahoo email.
Yeah.
So how serious it is, and people will hire you to have a Yahoo.com email?
Two very good questions. Do you want to talk about Yahoo? Yeah, what can I say? I mean, Yahoo's not great. It's not the end of the world. I'm not going to not hire you because you have a Yahoo email. But, it's not a coincidence that, in English, you can call somebody a Yahoo, and it sounds like a little bit like a bumpkin. It's not the most sophisticated. I don't know. I don't know, because it's kind of a failed tech company. What can I say? It's just.
I've never heard of that. It's somebody told me.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. I couldn't really tell you where it's not a stigma. It's not that bad. It's not as bad as a stigma. But it's just kind of like, remember those old commercials, I'm a Mac and I'm a PC? Google's cool, Yahoo's not, and it's been like that for close to 20 years.
Yahoo's the new Hotmail in terms of
Exactly. It looks like, you're a high schooler that got your first internet account in 1998, and Yahoo basically had to sell itself into a kind of weird corporate non-bankruptcy. It's I don't want to stand here and just tell you Yahoo is bad, but I'd recommend getting a Gmail account and forwarding your email. Another great pro tip is, look, just buy your domain name, whatever your name is, .com, or find a creative way to do it. And then it's very easy to set up with Gmail you pay $5 a month, $10 a month or something, and jr@jonathanrechtman.com is my personal email. So consider doing that. It takes a little bit of time, a little bit of money, but it shouldn't be expensive, and that is actually impressive, right? Because you have invested in your brand. To the point about expertise and how that gets formed, really, really good and important question. I would say you are, at the beginning, you're right, you're a little bit at the mercy of opportunity. So kind of whatever comes your way, that is going to define you a little bit. But I would recommend that you take some control and some initiative over that destiny. And that is a combination of, first of all, what are you most interested in? So all of the topics that you found yourself practicing on over the last 2 years, what gets you most excited? For me, it was environment at the time. It was 2008-9, the Copenhagen conference was coming up, and there was just a lot of kind of energy around that. A lot of my good friends were in new energy, and I just was personally passionate about this aspect of international relations, climate diplomacy. And so I started, reading more and more about it. I do a little bit of writing when I talk about spending time on online communities. read more, comment more, post more in these fields. And if you are engaging with live communities, find whatever topic it is that you're interested in and go join I should have put meetup.com. Find the local club that is involved in this activity, and you will kind of, it's a bit self-actualizing. The more time you spend with these communities, online and offline, the more likely it is that your first couple of gigs will come from these sectors, and you will then have the expertise to more, more credibly claim it. That being said, sometimes you just fall into a sector without really meaning to, and all of a sudden you are the leading expert on agriculture in Portuguese. I don't know. Things happen.
I have a question. So when I think of one of the fundamental tenets of free market economics is that the market rewards distinctiveness, rewards something that you can do to distinguish yourself from other people. Like talking about doing all the marketing and things like that, and that makes me think in terms of what my time is worth and how I should be spending my time marketing myself. It makes me wonder how valuable, I haven't researched the data, I'd like to know if there's any data, but how valuable a LinkedIn profile really is. Because on one hand, I hear everyone saying, you have to have one, you have to have one. I have it on my business card. I have one. I keep it updated. I have it on my business card. But on the other hand, back to that free market idea, is that if everyone can have a LinkedIn profile, they're not particularly customizable, everyone's looks the same. Are they really that valuable? And do you have any data on, or even if it's anecdotal, on LinkedIn really making a difference in someone's career?
Yeah, so it's a fair point. LinkedIn is not really intended to be a differentiator, but it is I would say, an essential and necessary infrastructure. So it's the kind of thing that I'm not saying you're going to get a job because you have a great LinkedIn profile. I'm saying that you will not get a job if you don't have a LinkedIn profile. It's just kind of a necessary, and to your point, maybe insufficient condition, but it is necessary. So definitely continue maintaining that, and then you make a valid point about wanting to differentiate beyond that. From your LinkedIn profile, add links to different kind of media that you have contributed or created. Thought leadership. If you want to blog on, for example, medium.com, it's a really great kind of long-form thought piece community. There are a number, if you've created any kind of content, linking to that, or simply reposting the content of others, that can be an effective differentiator and a builder of expertise. That being said, you can also go to a website like Squarespace, which helps build your own portfolio website very cheaply and easily, and so that's a little flashier than simply a LinkedIn profile, but you do need a LinkedIn profile.
You talk about all the industries, so I'm quite interested in legal interpretation. I'm not sure if you have done similar things and what's the market both in States and
I'm sorry, what?
legal interpretation.
Legal.
Yeah.
I'll have to get back to you on legal interpretation. Before I do, query that, are you speaking about kind of conference interpreting about legal issues or court interpreting?
Both of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think just as a general rule of thumb, court interpreting generally pays less than conference interpreting. It's usually considered a form of community interpreting, and has a separate accreditation process, which I think your mentors here will be very, very well equipped to tell you about. But law does exist as a sector within conference interpreting. I can only speak at the moment anecdotally, where I have done, I'd say probably 20 days worth of conference interpreting on legal stuff, and it has paid quite well, and in many cases involves some great travel. So I'm going to Finland next month for a conference, China-Finland conference on the legal system, and so that's fun.
What do you know about the market in China for law firms. For example, merger and acquisition,
Yeah.
due diligence, on the legal
Yeah.
side, or patent infringement, or kind of legal disputes across borders. What do you know about that?
Absolutely, really good point. So to speak more specifically about the China market, cross-border law in China is huge booming business, both on the government side, like the forum that I just mentioned, as well as intellectual property rights dialogues between governments. I've done tremendous amount of the other 17 days that I've done, a lot of it is EU-China or US-China dialogues on IP. And then in the private sector, a tremendous amount of M&A and cross-border investment that requires due diligence, research, compliance. And those take the form both of in-person meetings as well as a lot of telephone interpreting, which I mentioned we do, as well as document support. So for the translators, there's a lot of that. In that sense, law is similar to finance in that it is high value and permeates it's almost like cross-sectoral. So virtually everything you do with law will be law plus something else. It's law plus tech, or it's law plus health, or law, it's really only in the case of the government kind of legal system design dialogues that you're talking about law as an abstract concept in and of itself. Whenever it's in business, it's law is a kind of a tool to approach something else. Oh no, now I'm logged in and I still had something I wanted to share where I'm logged out. Is there a way to
I can lock it this way. Yeah.
questions?
So I was surprised to see art as number 3. Do you mind elaborating on what it entails in this?
Yeah, absolutely. We get a lot of requests for art, and again, there's some geography bias here, where China is one of our main geographies, and the Chinese arts and entertainment industry has just been booming. So I've done a lot of work for fine arts museums, galleries in China that are hosting kind of Western artists and doing exhibitions, so interpreting for visiting artists and residents. A lot of collaboration with museums. So for example, the Guggenheim is a client of ours, and Botero, the Colombian master, is a regular visitor as well. So artistic exchange, which is kind of on the more linguistic side, always a really interesting challenge to interpret for artists or translate for artists. It's very much a specialized kind of discourse, but it can be a lot of fun. It is much more creative than many other industries, which sounds kind of self-evident. But I mean, the act of translating is quite creative, because you would be forgiven for thinking that this critique or this lecture is complete bullshit, because it just doesn't seem to make any sense, and yet finding the right register of and the kind of conceptual equivalent in another language is always a challenge that honestly some people love and some people hate, and I tend to love it. But I know a lot of peer interpreters that just like can't stand the art talk, and but I really like it.
We have time for one more question.
One more question.
This is more specific to the Chinese market, because I know you're one of the few there. We have a lot of Chinese natives who have varying degrees of English proficiency, and you are a interpreter with English as well as a language. Can you just objectively describe how much of the advantage has that given you, and what's the ratio of the mix into English and into Chinese?
Yeah, you kind of called me out. When it comes to differentiation, I definitely did benefit from being one of the only, not the only, but one of the only kind of Chinese-speaking white guys in the market, right? So that is something that, again, we can't exactly make happen. And I think I did benefit from that. But you know, there are pros and cons to being the English A, Chinese B in the China market. So I definitely think that I won opportunities because of a bias for a native English speaker, but I also lost opportunities because I was not a native Chinese speaker, including some high-profile ones. And so, or legally, because I was not a Chinese national, I'm not qualified to work for most Chinese government organized events, or the Chinese government basically will never hire me. That being said, a lot of foreign governments are more likely to hire me. So it kind of comes out in the wash, though I think I was a net winner from that. Was there another aspect to the question, or?
What's the ratio of the grades?
So, you probably know this, but depending on your language pair, you're either expected to go bidirectionally or unidirectionally. So most European languages, you're going to be going from your 8 or 9 C languages into your A. For the strategic languages, which usually refer to emerging market languages, we are going back and forth both ways between our A's and our B's, or sometimes even B's and B's. So I almost am never hired to do just one direction. I would say it works out to about 50-50. And my own experience was also, at the beginning, about 70% consecutive, 30% simultaneous, and then a couple of years in, that flipped, and I started doing more simultaneous. Unless there are any super more pressing questions, I just wanted to do a plug. Cadence has an excellent blog, which you can find at blog.cadencetranslate.com, but it has been inactive for some time. We are getting ready this summer to relaunch our own social media and kind of content strategy, and I'd like to invite all of you guys to participate in that. So as you begin your own freelance careers, we would love to start collecting stories from young professionals that are getting started in the market. And we're gonna have like our own little kind of section on our blog called Freelancer Journeys. And I would love to invite you guys to share your own journeys, and this would be an opportunity to have your voice and your kind of personal brand highlighted on our platform and reach a much greater audience, as well as a podcast that we're planning, and an interesting Instagram play that we have in mind. Do you guys use Instagram? Is Instagram still cool with the kids these days? I refuse to do Snapchat because I'm 32 years old. So like, I don't get it. But basically we want to start a channel of high quality photos that are kind of glamour shots of conferences. So whatever conferences you go to, whether it's like you got a really cool badge, or there's really cool like, conference swag, the handout bag that they give you, or if there's some kind of glamour shot of what's going on at the scene, you can hashtag our channel, and we'll be sharing like the highlights of cool conferences. So I'll invite all of you as you start your careers to contribute to our social media. If you're interested in that, make sure that you reach out to me, Jonathan@cadencetranslate.com. I would really love to hear from each and every one of you. And if you go to www.cadencetranslate.com/learn, you can be signed up to receive information about ongoing educational opportunities that we have. So I mentioned finance is the top paying industry segment. On June 20th, I'm going to be doing a webinar on financial diplomacy. In the weekend before that, June 15th, 16th, I'll be at a very high level international finance forum that has a lot of central bankers and finance ministers, and we're going to kind of talk about how the diplomacy of financial and monetary policy works. And so we'll be hosting that over a webinar, and everybody can kind of, by June, hopefully you'll all be scattered around the world, but hopefully we'll be able to tune in. Please sign up at cadencetranslate.com/learn to stay up to date about that, as well as other opportunities to contribute to our platform. Once again, I want to thank you guys all so much. Thank you, Liddy, and thank you, Miss, for taking me here.
Thank you.
Please be in touch anytime, any reason. We love that. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Okay.
Thanks so much for doing that.
I would still like to go in.
Let it go when I was starting. Both sides are and that's good. Good for the industry.
More of like admin.
For there to be people on both sides that if you mess up, they're going to catch not all of
in China and she couldn't even rely on
I'd say by years 2.5.
the first 6 months is like
Yeah, you know, but it's also Hi, Jonathan. Thanks so much for listening. Oh, excellent. Great. Yeah, I would look at the one. So,